Hi, folks. Thanks for watching my monologue. As you may have heard, there's been a recent run on guns and ammunition. I just wanted to let you know that Guns Etc. is in a 10,200 square foot building which holds a lot of... So Guns Etc. is open and has a lot of product. Or you can go to gunsetc.com. That's gunsetc.com. And if you like my monologue, please subscribe to our channel using 960 The Patriot. Happy April 28th. And speaking with Brandon Weichert yesterday, he said something when I had occasion to raise Phyllis Schlafly's book, A Choice, Not an Echo. He said, yes, that's one of the most important books in conservatism. I mentioned, yes, that, and Conscience of a Conservative, and Witness, and maybe too William Buckley's God and Man at Yale. He agreed, and it got me to thinking, though we've discussed these books before in this time of a lot of extra time at home, autodidacticism is one of the best things one can engage in. And to the degree you've read those books, let us recall how important reminding ourselves of them is, of the important things in them. Perhaps some forgotten, perhaps some just buried away. To reclaim those works I mentioned and others is to do nothing more than restore the understanding and knowledge we all once had that made us who we are, that gave us our thinking, our character, our intellect, our souls. But that, after all, I guess, is our task, reminding us of those things. That's how Plato put it in a fetching pitch at the end of one of his plays. Hadliarchus wrote, "We are reminded that the permanent things will not always be seen. That is precisely the function of teaching and statesmanship, to bring all of us back to what we once all sought." So we find ourselves backing our way into the lessons of Plato's Meno, that so much of our knowledge is already tucked away within us. And it becomes a matter then of drawing out the things we come to feel that we have known all along. The genius of statecraft as teaching is that it reminds us of the things we used to know. And when it is done rightly, we realize there are things perhaps we actually never ceased to know. To that end, I thought I'd reprise some of that wisdom, not quite ancient truths yet, for some of those classics, with the hope we might all whet and re-whet our thirst to go through them again, summon their wisdom up again. If there were ever a time we needed wisdom, grounded in something modern, addressing something or things ancient, it's probably just now, don't you think? I usually start the Conscience of a Conservative at the beginning. No great wisdom there, but today I thought it worth starting at the end. Mr. Goldwater's chapter, his last chapter in that book, is about communism and the roadmap to defeat it. Before I read from it, it's worth thinking about a moment how many conservatives, how many intellectuals were writing treatises on how to defeat an ideology as well as a geopolitical foe back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I point that out to ask this question about the state of our state of conservatism and intellectual force. So not only in the 1960s did you have greats like William Buckley and all the public intellectuals he printed and put forward into the public sphere, from Wilmore Kendall to Richard Weaver to Harry Jaffa to so many others. You had elected representatives like Barry Goldwater writing tomes and giving intellectual speeches. We must not forget the speeches Ronald Reagan was giving on the circuit in those days as well. Not known as an intellect per se, indeed scandalously quite the opposite. His speeches on behalf of Goldwater and General Electric were chock full of intellectual force and wisdom. And it's sad to think about how we just don't have that now today, do we? I mean to say this. Think what you will of our movement, but can you name me one senator who does what Goldwater was doing in the 1960s? I think we have some great ones, don't get me wrong, and Tom Cotton probably has all that ability and more. But after that, and maybe still not that. Rich Lowry, who edits National Review, what to say? Will people 40 and 50 years hence, never mind 15 years hence, be saying things like, you really ought to go back and it's on YouTube, watch that great debate of Rich Lowry's on fill in the blank. Will he be mentioned on television shows as a cultural reference to an intellectual icon? No. And to some extent, it's not his fault. Not if you give someone like Buckley his due. It's a strong and high standard to meet. I collaborate a lot with William Bennett, for example. I'll never be anything like him. But you take my point. Where once were oaks, there are now, unfortunately, too many twigs. So we must go back again and again to study the oaks as we study history. Isn't that the point of studying history, after all? So if I may, here's how Barry Goldwater ended his book. He wrote, "The future as I see it will unfold along one of two paths. Either the communists will retain the offensive, will lay down one challenge after another, will invite us in local crisis after local crisis to choose between all-out war and limited retreat, and will force us ultimately to surrender or accept war under the most disadvantageous circumstances. Or we will summon the will and the means for taking the initiative and wage a war of attrition against them and hope thereby to bring about the internal disintegration of the communist empire. One course runs the risk of war and leads, in any case, to probable defeat. The other runs the risk of war and holds forth the promise of victory for Americans who cherish their lives, but their freedom more. The choice cannot be difficult." Close quote. And that right there is how he ended his book. Rather abruptly, but rather not. He postulated that we had a challenge and we could either meet it or be defeated by it. And if we met it, it would run risks, but this is important. If we cherish freedom more than life, the choice was not to be and should not be, as he put it, difficult. I think we've lost something of that understanding, and you've heard me speak of this a lot before, that there are some things more important than life. Every great movie, every great book shows us that. Every person in our military understands that. And for goodness sakes, that's the whole idea behind founding our country in the first place, isn't it? What was the over-under we'd beat the British? What was the polling on whether we should have even tried? Well, that's why some children still learn, but all children used to learn. What Patrick Henry said in 1775, "Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." We all used to know that. Do you know the story of John Stark? I bet you don't. A New Hampshire man, a general in the Continental Army, a hero of the Battle of Bunker Hill and the Battle of Trenton. He was invited to speak at a reunion of one of the Revolutionary War battles, the Battle of Bennington. The year was 1809. He was too sick to travel and attend, so he mailed in a toast. He wrote this, quote, "You say you wish your young men to see me, but you have seen me, and you can tell that I never was worth much for a show, and can certainly not be worth seeing now. In case of my not being able to attend, you wish my sentiments, then you shall have them, as free as the air we breathe. As I was then, I am now, the friend of equal rights, of men, of representative democracy, of republicanism, and the Declaration of Independence, the great charter of our national rights, and of course the friend of the indissoluble Union and Constitution of the States. I am the enemy of all foreign influence, for all foreign influence is the influence of tyranny. This is the only spot for liberty. This is the only republic on earth." He also toasted his fellow soldiers from the battle, writing, quote, "They were men that had not learned the art of submission, nor had they been trained to the art of war. But our astonishing success taught the enemies of liberty that undisciplined free men are superior to veteran slaves." In the postscript to his toast, he wrote this, "Live free or die. Death is not the worst of evils." And that's where, of course, the New Hampshire state motto comes from. It was the well-understood ethic of our founders, as much as the idea that undisciplined free men are superior to slaves, which is, of course, to say freedom is superior to slavery, which is, of course, to note we all abhor slavery, or at least say we do. But do we love its opposite, freedom? The child of the revolution, I fear, may have eaten its parents, or perhaps it's the great-great-great-grandchildren. Revolutions can eat and do eat their children too often, after all. And so we're put in mind of what John Adams wrote to his wife. He wrote, "I must study politics and war that our sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. Our sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, and naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. Good enough. That's one value of freedom. But in all our studying of painting and poetry and tapestry and porcelain and the like, have we forgotten or not why John Adams studied war and politics in the first place? The answer to that question, I think, will get us to the answer of what the point of cherishing some things over death or more than death was all about in the first place, and why some of us still think that way and think a whole lot of others should think that way too, especially right now. Thank you.